Okay, so here's another really interesting question. Can we save the planet Venus? And much like the whole, space race to colonize on Mars and pretty much like, save the planet, I think that saving Venus would actually be another truly cool thing in human history if somebody could do it. And the origins behind the planet would also be rather clear as to like what we could explain from its past if we could somehow get into its core. So, for example, even though Mars seems a lot easier and probably more realistic to colonize on, Venus, on the other hand, first of all, what we'd have to do is we'd have to figure out a way to clear up the sulfuric acid, as well as find a way to create somewhat of an atmosphere for Venus, so that way it doesn't just have cold temperatures. I mean, again, assuming that the sulfuric acid was to dry up somehow, or just to fade away, if we could just somehow get rid of that. Because that is what killed Venus, was the sulfuric acid. Not to mention, Venus looked just like Earth. Water, land, had life on it probably, no doubt about it. So if you were to believe that we could get on Venus's atmosphere somehow and safely retrieve like some of the stuff that's from it, we could learn a lot about its past, if I haven't said that already, and we could very well save the planet, start it over, before it's engulfed by the sun, but that's a long ways away still. You figure if the planets are at least 4.7 or 4.6, I think it's like 4.67, if I remember correctly, billion years old, but close enough anyways. You figure a lot can happen 4.67 billion years old, billion years. So you figure, the sun has another 4 billion years, 5 billion years, most planets could live a long time. And what I think is really interesting is if the human race's whole goal is to find a way to colonize, kind of like Star Trek, like for example, even though Star Trek was just science fiction, but the idea seems realistic though, that humans will eventually get so advanced that we become so advanced that we will just, move on. But, we'll carry our origins with us, where like the planets will cease to exist, obviously, one day, but or heck, maybe we could take the planet with us one day, if we could somehow find a way to control the orbit, or something like that. Or maybe we could, or better yet, maybe one day we could find a way to save the sun included. We could shoot like a hydrogen laser, sounds stupid, but like without it technically freezing somehow in space, and maybe somehow we could find a way to shoot something into the sun's core to give it more hydrogen to a rate where we don't just drain all the hydrogen on our planet, and we could very well save the sun from expanding with all that extra helium that it's said to have as soon as all the hydrogen evaporates, because that's what they said the sun's supposed to do. It's supposed to like inflate like a balloon because all that extra hydrogen or helium that's in it, as well as hydrogen, once it's all gone. But the way I look at it, anything's possible. All we have to do is just, yeah, there are going to be some ideas that are better than others. Like, for example, if you were to ask a scientist, if you had a choice between Venus or Mars, what sounds like a better planet of saving? We should probably save Mars first before we save Venus. But my point I'm trying to say is, I think we should try to find a way to save Venus, though, because if we do, we can very well go to its planet and dig up, like, maybe find something that really kind of taught us of our own origins, because these planets are close to ours. Not to mention, you look at like the origin of the moon, for example. It said it came from a planet Thera or something like that. And that planet was said to be just like Earth. I'm noticing a pattern here. It seems like you have all these planets that have like all water on them and they look just like Earth, but yet they all suffered some devastating fate, like sulfuric acid and volcanic activity killed Venus, which is why its temperature is like 864 degrees Fahrenheit, which is insane. Mars was dried up with all this volcanic activity, kind of had water too. And Thera was probably a planet that had water on it, but it crashed into Earth somehow. Crazy, yeah. Another thing that I think is really interesting is, if all these planets had similar characteristics towards Earth, and you have life on Earth, then it's very knowledgeable that maybe there was a planet that had life on it. There's another theory where they say that every single piece of, I don't know if it was like something. It was like from a movie or something like that. And yeah, you could say it was from a movie because it sounds like it's science fiction. This has got science fiction written all over it. There was a quote. I'm trying to think what movie it was from. It was a really good one where they stated that you know, every single piece of matter is like a living organism of some kind. And think about that for a second. Every single piece of material seems to be like some sort of living organism somehow. Sounds sort of mind-blowing, fourth wall breaking. It just looks interesting. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like it makes sense, but it's like an idea that kind of sounds really interesting to hold on to, though. The origins of life, what really happened well before us. Because another way you could look at it, another thing you could really study is like the past is always, and as far as cosmology goes, the study of the universe and all that, the universe is obviously older than we are, and even beyond is even older than we are. But it's like, if you think about it, you know, you try and figure out the past of the universe, and it seems a lot more interesting than just talking about the future of it, which is actually also a really good portion. Think about life on other planets, the past, how do they go extinct, did they move here? Like, you know, here's another good way of thinking about it. Maybe at one point when Venus and Mars and all these other planets had life on them, because again, you know, how many other planets existed in the solar system before they were allegedly destroyed? You know, I'll give you a few examples. I was reading that there were planets that were probably engulfed by Mercury, or, you know, before Mercury by the Sun. There was probably a couple planets that were forced out of the atmosphere by Jupiter. You know, like all these theories, like, you know, like, to really get you wondering, how many, like, what really happened to this universe before we really became what we were? Because we only know what's out there based off what we find, but there's obviously so many things we don't know, and yet you can prove that because it's all out there. You know, Venus obviously had a past that we don't understand because there's so many things that happened before we came along, but it just kind of makes you wonder, you know, maybe there's fossils on its planet. And maybe even Mars has fossils on it, and maybe even we can, you know, and as stupid as it might sound, maybe we even came from another planet and we just landed on this one because it was like all these other planets that were just like this one, but it survived all these years somehow. Now how's that one for you?